Live from the Pix 11 Social Media Center, she's got more than 30 years on the streets as an investigative reporter. Now, Pix 11's Mary Murphy takes you deep into the world of cold cases, terrorism, America's drug crisis, and more. These are the Mary Murphy Files.
Good evening and welcome to Pix 11 Facebook Live, a special edition of the Mary Murphy Files. A huge day for the Drug Enforcement Administration and Ray Donovan, who is the special agent in charge here in New York. But you played a lot of roles in this investigation of El Chapo, who was found guilty today on all 10 counts against him of conducting a continuing criminal enterprise of drug trafficking, murder conspiracy, and the name of this show, The Guy Who Got El Chapo. There's a reason that we're calling you that, and we're going to give that in a couple of minutes. But first, here's a recap of what happened today at federal court in Brooklyn.
This conviction is a victory for every family who has lost a loved one to the black hole of addiction.
Whatever else you thought about the legend of El Chapo, who managed 2 escapes from Mexican prisons and married a young, glamorous woman, the U.S. government reminded us that his conviction on all counts was payback for at least 25 years of destructive drug trafficking as leader of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico.
Guzman's deadly drugs destroyed many American families for nothing more than greed and power.
He got a very vigorous defense, as you saw. Do I think it was a fair trial? No.
3 years after Mexican Marines captured him, and just over 2 years after the Drug Enforcement Administration and Homeland Security flew Joaquin Guzman Loera to MacArthur Airport on Long Island, the government released new footage of his first arrival on U.S. soil, looking uncertain as he was led down the steps of the jet and red-eyed as he waited for transfer to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. His demeanor was a far cry from the ruthless leader described during a 3-month trial, with testimony that he paid a former Mexican president a $100 million bribe, even having one man buried alive. Now El Chapo faces a life sentence here in the U.S.
It is a sentence from which there is no escape and no return.
U.S. Attorney Richard Donahue, you were at that press conference today. Was there jubilation for the U.S. government?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's a long time coming for us. Justice has been served.
Yeah, and you were part of the whole process of trying to find El Chapo. You were with the Special Operations Division. How many years ago were you trying to get him? And you actually did succeed in helping capture him twice.
Sure. So from about 2012 is when we initially started bringing the team together to go after El Chapo. And then throughout the years, we developed a lot of information that led to his first capture. But then you know what happened after that. He escaped.
Yeah, he was free for about 13 years. He escaped first in a laundry basket, and then the second time there was actually a tunnel built under the shower, and a motor scooter took him to freedom.
That's right. Right. So you think about it this way. We captured him already. He's in a federal prison in Mexico, and over 8 to 10 month period, he builds a tunnel and he walks out.
Which indicates to you there's probably a lot of corruption in the prison system and even higher perhaps in Mexico. Yes,
well, Chapo has a lot of contacts all throughout Mexico, so there's no doubt that he had the capability or capacity to do that. It was a concern of ours, even then.
Okay, so I want to show some footage that you released today, the U.S. government, that actually showed when El Chapo came to New York in 2017. We have him exiting the plane. It was a private jet. It went to the airport on Long Island, and I know it started with him sort of staring out the window. He looked a little bit lost. You were there at the airport. What do you remember about that moment when he landed?
Well, I remember that for us in law enforcement and all the different agencies that were there, that this was a victory for us. We got him on U.S. soil after really decades of hard work by all these different law enforcement agencies, foreign and domestic. So Mexico as well. Mexican agencies were very much involved with collaborating alongside us to go after El Chapo. And this is the culmination of many, many years of work.
Well, did he seem bewildered? What was your impression of him when you first saw him?
Well, I feel like at that point the realization set in that he was no longer in control. He was no longer in Mexico where he had all the contacts, where he had the resources, and a lot of people behind him. And so finally he's in the United States, and that was it. Lost total control.
Yeah, we have another piece of footage. We call it the debriefing when he was talking to some of the DEA agents. He's sitting there shackled, and probably, I guess they had a Spanish language interpreter, right?
That's right. At this point, they're just trying to inform him what's going to happen next, where he's going to go. Still, it's just him realizing that he's no longer in Mexico, and you had all these law enforcement organizations there present to witness him being extradited into Long Island, into the United States.
I know his eyes were very red. At one point, someone said to me it looked like he wiped a tear from his eye. Was that your impression?
Yeah, I felt like when we saw that he was emotional. He was emotional, and for us, it was emotional as well. We were very happy to see him and to get him here in New York City. It was important for us to be there and witness him arriving there as well.
And, you know, he was very bold. He gave an interview, I think when he was free the second time. Actor Sean Penn and a Mexican-American actress went to speak to him while he was on the run. And there is some footage of, you actually hear him speaking, but this shows Sean Penn, the Oscar-winning actor. He went to Mexico, and it wasn't long after the interview was published in Rolling Stone magazine that he was captured again for the second time. So how much of that interview played a role in you finding him the second time?
Well, not really. It didn't really play a role. So, you know, like I said, the one thing that led to his capture the first time was really the collaborative effort. We had all these different agencies that were sharing their investigative information. We had willing partners in the Mexicans, and we were determined. We weren't going to quit until we found out where he was and who was protecting him. And I think once we captured him the first time, we developed a model to really work off of and to go get him again.
Now, Andrea Cavalier is our producer working with us on this show tonight. I think we have a clip of El Chapo actually speaking in Spanish, obviously. There's a translation on the bottom. But he was talking about the fact that a lot of Mexicans are poor. He's on a farm, and he's talking about why he did this. You know, he was worth $14 billion. Do we have that clip, Andrea?
No, eso es una realidad, que las drogas destruyen. Desgraciadamente, como le comento, por donde yo me crié, pues.
You hear like the rooster in the background, but this was during his escape, and that was kind of bold to do the interview.
I thought it was very bold, but that's also indicative of where his mind is at. In Mexico, he felt very powerful. And so he felt like he had control, especially in the mountains of Sinaloa and Durango and Chihuahua. So that's why he was able to say that. Really very little fear at that point.
And especially when he's backed up by guns and bodyguards, right?
That's right.
I mean, they said he was ruthless during the trial. It was a 3-month trial. 14 cooperating witnesses who were either drug suppliers from South America or Central America or Mexico. So those 14 made deals with the government. And because it took 6 days, it seemed that there might have been some concern by the government that the jury was saying, hey, wait a minute, are these guys getting a deal? You know,
right.
They're bad.
My take on that was you had 35-year criminal history. And so you have so much evidence, so many witnesses, and just not only the defendant witness, but law enforcement witnesses that could really attest to his entire involvement in the Sinaloa cartel and drug trafficking going back decades. So it didn't surprise us that it went into a second week.
Okay. I want to mention that you're a New York kid, born in the Bronx. Your background is Irish American and Puerto Rican, and now you have risen to this top job in New York with the Drug Enforcement Administration. You were very much a part of the captures of El Chapo both times. We have footage of the second raid from 2016. Let's play that. It was pretty crazy.
Cuidado, aquel lado. Cúbrame aquel lado. La ventana. Tenemos este. Vamos, hey, dos más. Dos más. Vamos. Espacio. Tengo esa. ¿Hay más ahí? Hey. Sale. Muévete allá. Apóyame aquí. Hey. Con este. Apoya acá este. Muévete. Uno este. Uno más. Ven para acá. Ven. Cúbreme esa puerta. esa puerta. Hey. Entren en esa. Dos más. Dos más. Dos más. Hey. Dale. De una vez. De una vez.
That was January 2016, the second time you captured El Chapo, and the Mexican Marines were very much involved, and they're telling him to surrender in Spanish.
That's right. So at that point, it was months of us pursuing El Chapo. The one thing that I have to say clearly is that we couldn't have done that without the support and really the bravery of the Mexican Marines, CMAR, and their willingness to pursue El Chapo over years. There's no question about it that U.S. federal law enforcement wouldn't have been able to do that. We worked alongside him, which led to his capture.
There was so much testimony at the trial about corruption, though, in Mexico. One of the witnesses said that the former president took a $100 million bribe. He denied it. What do you know about that?
Right. What I'd say about corruption, is there corruption? Yes, but not with the teams that we work with. And we work with a whole host of different law enforcement and prosecutors all across Mexico. And for the most part, the people that we work with, we don't see the corruption. And this is years of developing, nurturing relationships. And really, often where law enforcement, Mexican law enforcement, they're putting their lives on the line to support U.S. operations to pursue these bad guys.
We have some more footage of El Chapo that day that he was brought to the airport in 2017. He's actually kind of leaving the hangar. He's walking to the car. He's going to be taken to the MCC. And, you know, he basically was kept in solitary. He wasn't allowed to see his wife. There was testimony at the trial that his young wife was part of one of these escapes, that she had knowledge, but she could not be forced to testify against him. That's correct.
Right. Yeah.
He's being led to the SUV here. He spent most of the last few years in the MCC, but they built a special cell in the courthouse in the Eastern District in Brooklyn, and he stayed there during the week, during the trial, I was told.
That's right. So our concern with El Chapo was really security. No question about it. Does he have the resources? Yes. Here's a man that's generated billions of dollars in revenue off of illicit narcotics. And so certainly it was a concern of ours and all law enforcement agencies bringing him here into the United States and then housing him downtown in Brooklyn, that we knew we had to be very much aware of any potential threats.
No way he was going to escape.
That's right.
Okay. There were a lot of witnesses, 56 in total, and I mentioned the 14 cooperators, and one of them was from Colombia. We have a split screen of what he looked like before and after. The image, I think it's on the right of our screen. He had extensive plastic surgery so that he could try to elude the authorities, but he had a lot to say about El Chapo and his business dealings.
That's right. This was one of El Chapo's sources of supply for cocaine. Chupeta.
Yes.
That's right.
Means lollipop.
That's right. And really, he was one of the individuals that just would send ton amounts of cocaine to Sinaloa cartel and to Chapo Guzman in particular, and have them push it into the United States, all across America.
You know, we do have that footage again of when El Chapo first got off the plane, when he's exiting the plane, and I want to show it again because I have some questions to ask about things that did not come out at the trial. There was a report right as the jury was going to deliberate. It came out the weekend before, and it said that there was information El Chapo used to have 13-year-old girls brought to him, and for $5,000 he would have sex with these girls and often put some kind of a drug into a drink, maybe to relax them, who knows. But this did not come out at the trial. It was considered prejudicial information. What do you know about that?
So what I'd say about that is, do we have definitive proof? No. But do I doubt it? No.
He supposedly called them his vitamins, and he was hoping to keep his youthful vigor.
Again, that's the same thing. We never had really solid evidence of that. And so, but knowing the man and knowing about him and everything that he was willing to do, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, he's like this legend, this myth. But what do you think we need to remember? We're seeing him look a little bit bewildered here when he arrived in the United States in 2017. But when he's got a gun in his hand,
sure.
It's a sort of a different demeanor.
What I'd say the American public should think of is think about all your communities, your neighborhoods, your families that suffered from overdose deaths, and all the pain that's caused by that. from that local level in that neighborhood, you may not know that this is the man behind the opioid crisis. But I assure you of one thing, that the Sinaloa cartel is certainly behind the epidemic that took place all across America. And so when I look at the verdict today, his conviction, it really, to me, it's a success, but it's about justice for them. It's justice for all those families and for all those communities and those towns and cities.
I mean, it's a national public health emergency, the opioid crisis, and we know he pumped in heroin and cocaine, marijuana,
That's right,
methamphetamines. People are writing in, and some are saying, stop the consumers, and maybe we can stop the crisis. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say, listen, I think education, prevention is important. I certainly would agree that we have to educate our young kids to stay away from drugs. But here's the issue. Once someone starts using opioids, then it's a downward spiral.
Quick question. Ian Plancy is writing in. He said, has he been linked to the fentanyl epidemic?
Great question. Yes. And that's where you go back to the opioid epidemic. And what I would say is they were the first, they meaning the Sinaloa cartel and El Chapo, were the first to take Mexican heroin and lace it with fentanyl and push it into the United States. And why? Because the potency of the Mexican heroin wasn't as strong. And so they wanted to make it more potent so they can get more clients.
Right. I did a 6-part series called Heroin A to Z back in 2014, so it's almost 5 years ago. And at the time, we were talking about the Mexican cartels.
Right.
And it's before he was captured. But in New York, it's sometimes the Dominicans that are actually distributing, the Dominicans that are involved in drug dealing, the crews.
Sure, like local distribution, yes. There are Dominican organizations that will receive narcotic or heroin, fentanyl loads from Mexico. We know of Dominican organizations that will travel to Mexico to meet a source of supply in Mexico. So yes, locally, Dominican drug organizations control distribution.
Okay, what can we expect for El Chapo now? He hasn't been formally sentenced, but a lot of people are expecting life in prison because of all the counts he was convicted of. Where's he going next?
Yes, we expect the same thing. We expect him to be to get life in prison sometime this summer. Hopefully, he'll be sentenced, and then go to a maximum security penitentiary.
People are talking about Supermax in Colorado. Would you expect that?
We do, but we don't know for certain. Not yet.
And would he be in solitary? What would his conditions be?
It all depends. I think initially he would be. And then we'll have to see over time what happens.
He has 7-year-old twin daughters, and I was told that they were actually able to visit him during his time in New York. Do you know if they'd be able to visit him in a Supermax?
Yes, we don't know that just yet. We have to wait and see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there anything you'd like to say, sort of taking this all in today? I know all those prosecutors and DEA agents assembled outside the courthouse were very excited today.
Yes, what I would say is exactly that this is over 30 years of work. And the significance really is, it's not about the law enforcement. It's not about all of our foreign partners. It's really about the people that are affected by the drug trade. And ultimately, the message to them is, this is a victory for you.
And people probably need to remember that. And even though some people were writing Free El Chapo, he sort of had this cult following. Why do you think that was? We have some more footage of him we can maybe show now.
Well, the one thing I would say about El Chapo is, right, before the trial, people didn't know that he was a ruthless killer. And he actually had his hands on killing people himself and directing many, many people to die.
It came out at the trial that he actually tortured people and then a couple of times shot them right in the head in front of other witnesses, had one man buried alive, that he burned others.
That's right. And then think about this. There were drug wars between other rival cartels where innocent people were killed. Children, mothers, young teens were just killed at the hands of his organization and under the direction of him. And so when people say, well, free El Chapo, well, they don't know to the extent and all the violence that he caused, the harm that he caused in Mexico and the United States and really throughout the world.
And I think it was announced today at the press conference that 100,000 Mexicans have died in drug wars there. That's an enormous number.
And that's right. And so El Chapo was behind starting those wars, many of those wars, and sending people to their deaths.
Where do you go next?
Well, there's plenty of targets. I think the one thing we learned in law enforcement is that we had to do a better job at sharing our information to go after bad guys. And that's a takeaway from us. And from our perspective, we now have a model to go after any and every high-level criminal boss throughout the world.
One last question. I know he said that he brought the drugs in submarines, tractor trailers, planes, trains, automobiles. But one of the things that came out at trial by the defense was that El Mayo, his business partner, that he was the real brains behind the operation. He's on the lam. Mexican authorities were helping him, and El Chapo was the scapegoat. What do you say to that?
Say El Chapo and El Mayo partners, equal partners down the line. If they were getting cocaine shipments or other drugs, they did it in partnership.
And where do you think he is now, El Mayo?
He is down in Mexico, fearing our arrival.
And last question, as we show a little bit more footage. You were in court for the verdict. What was your impression of how El Chapo reacted, or anyone else there, like his wife or anyone?
He acted the exact same way I thought he would react. He was very stoic. He knows what he's guilty of. And so I don't think he expected to walk out of court.
I know that text messages that he sent were used against him, wiretaps, and even a little bit of that Rolling Stone magazine article. So looks like El Chapo will be going to prison for life, doing large parts of the work that you did with the Drug Enforcement Administration and many other partners. And we can't thank you enough for giving us the first live interview post-verdict. Thank you for coming to the Pix 11 Social Media Center. Ray Donovan, the special agent in charge for New York for the Drug Enforcement Administration.
You're welcome, Mary.
Congratulations on all your hard work bearing fruit.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I thank our viewers for joining us tonight, and of course, we'll follow up on the next trial. For now, I'm Mary Murphy, wishing you a good night, and thanks again.